Hello lovely humans. Hello lovely humans, welcome to this space on the internet. Today's video will be about the pathologization, if that's a word. I believe it's a word. Pathologization of asexuality and asexual people, and all those who fall on the asexual spectrum or aspecs. And it's also Halloween, so I'm being an elf. Being medicalized or pathologized is one of the primary issues that I think asexual groups face, and oftentimes this has to do with a lack of education or acceptance of asexuality. So to correct such miseducation, misinformation, we're going to be debunking a few different misconceptions about asexuality as it relates to being medicalized or pathologized. Some of the misconceptions we're going to cover are those related to libido or sex drive, having a broken libido or low sex drive, and that being a problem. Number 2 will have to do with being mentally ill in such a way that you are depressed or avoidant or asocial. Number 3 will be covering the fact that aces may or may not be, but are definitely not necessarily developmentally delayed or autistic. And last but not least, 4 will be talking about social anxiety and maladaptive daydreaming. Those are kind of the things that I think asexuals tend to hear a lot. So for example, if they come out as ace or mention that they are asexual, they are more likely to receive questions asking if that is related to or the result of having a sexual dysfunction or low libido, or being mentally ill or depressed, or being autistic, or being socially anxious, or a maladaptive daydreamer. So to address the misconception that asexuals are simply suffering from low libido or sex drive, this myth I think is just so simultaneously false and also just irrelevant on so many levels that it becomes difficult to even begin to address. Asexuality is not necessarily connected to any physical condition. Being asexual and having sexual dysfunction or apathy are very different things. Asexuality is an identity describing feeling little to no sexual attraction for other people. It just means you aren't into people sexually. Sexual dysfunction or apathy indicates that you are experiencing a medical issue that is impacting your functionality in your life. Often it will be identified because someone will be interested or into people sexually, but not have the responding normal physical reactions or mental reactions associated with being attracted to someone. Someone can be asexual and sexually and just generally healthy. Someone could also be experiencing sexual dysfunction or low libido or low sex drive and be asexual, and that doesn't mean asexuality is inherently bad or a medical issue. The key here is to separate those things. That said, someone's indifference to or disinterest in others can be affected by things like mood-altering medications such as antidepressants, and perhaps this is accompanied by sexual dysfunction or lack of libido or lowering of libido. This does not disqualify someone from identifying as asexual, because really if someone's experience aligns most closely with asexuality, the way in which they've arrived to identify as asexual is of little relevance when compared to the fact that they are able to use the term asexual and that be a useful descriptor for them. Aces are not broken regardless, so this misconception is particularly harmful, saying things like, we have broken libido or broken sex drive or are somehow disordered in that way. It becomes harmful because in response to brokenness or illness, the type of things we go to the doctor for that are medicalized, typically the response is to fix it, to treat it, to make it go away. When you apply this to asexuality as if it is a disease or an illness or an unfortunate condition, fixing it just means conversion therapy. So it's not doing asexuals any use to tell them that they are sexually dysfunctional or have a broken libido, because then they may just be continually trying to fix something that's just innate to who they are and won't change. moving on to the misconception that asexual people are mentally ill, especially in the case of being depressed or socially avoidant or asocial. We just love to assume that queer people are mentally ill now, don't we? That's fun. And really, the truth is that we are more likely to be mentally ill, I believe. I'm pretty sure that is backed up by science. But this is not because we are queer on some biological level. It is because, as queer people, we experience various events in our lives that make us more likely to develop mental illness. Queer people's struggle with mental health is largely accepted as being due to social factors as opposed to any biological or like innate factors to who they are. And funnily enough, you might be able to stretch and draw the conclusion that by calling us and continuing to call us mentally ill, therefore not accepting us, you're more likely to contribute to a growing mental illness within a queer person. So let's just think on that. Asexuality is not the same as being depressed or subsequently disinterested in sex, and it's not the same as being avoidant or opposed to developing connections with other people. These are not mutually exclusive states of being. You can be mentally ill, depressed, avoidant, and asexual. You can also be none of those things and asexual. You can also be all of those things and not asexual. There's a set number of combinations you can have here because they are two separate variables, if that makes sense. So while these are not mutually exclusive states of being, asexuality in and of itself is not a mental illness. It is not depression. We are not asexual because we are depressed. We are not depressed because we are asexual. It goes both ways. Next, moving on to the misconception that asexuals are developmentally delayed or autistic, for example. So, no, it's not bad to be developmentally delayed or disabled or different, and asexuality, while prevalent in autistic and neurodivergent populations, is found among many, if not all demographics. Most, if not all demographics, will have some subset of asexual people. And the subset of people within people with autism happens to be larger than that of the general population. I did make a video on it, so you can watch it if you want. So yeah, this is just, once again, we need to separate any sort of medicalized condition from asexuality because that is how medical discrimination takes place, and you're going to be treated as if you're dealing with something that needs to go away, which again is conversion therapy. And even though it's perhaps not ill-intentioned at all times, continuing to fail to accept asexuality as a valid state of being, not in need of being fixed, is going to create a lot of problems, including conversion therapy, if you didn't hear it already, which, is known to be extremely damaging to a person's entire being. And last misconception I'll sort of be addressing is the notion that asexuals are socially anxious, or especially for fictosexual people or avid asexual readers, that we are maladaptive daydreamers or just like too stuck in our own world, or like afraid of real people. On a similar note to what I was talking about before, the assumption that we are socially anxious or too dreamy can have a great invalidating impact on asexual people. What about not being sexually interested in someone, or anyone, denotes your entire psyche and social capacity? Nothing. Asexuality, the way you exist in your daydreams, are just like different things. So all I can really say on this one is that it's just wrong, especially when it comes to assuming that that's like the root of asexuality, that all of these maladaptive daydreamers just like ganged up and came up with this new like trendy word for maladaptive daydreaming. As in the case of all of the aforementioned misconceptions, it is possible to be socially anxious or maladaptive daydreamer and also asexual. In fact, it may be more likely that as a maladaptive daydreamer or socially anxious person that you're also asexual, or that as an asexual person you are a maladaptive daydreamer or socially anxious. But those are two different things that have a basis in social correlation, or even relation. So while yes, they're two variables that are very intertwined when we analyze social factors that contribute to both states of existence and the ways in which we express those states of existence. It's my point being that while in general, pathology or illness or medical conditions and asexuality can be related, they are not entirely unrelated concepts, but they are distinct and are not the same thing and are not direct causes for one another. There's no way to invalidate a person's asexuality by equating it with pathology, an illness, a disease, or anything of the like, because they aren't the same thing. Because someone can simultaneously be asexual and be anything. I feel like I find myself repeating that point a lot. The point that asexuality and literally anything are not mutually exclusive. Like, even asexuality and allosexuality have their points of intersection at some times, and that's sometimes what we might call the asexual spectrum, and that's why it exists as a spectrum. In existing as a spectrum, there's literally nothing, not even its direct opposite, being allosexuality, that can contradict asexuality or invalidate it in general. And that includes mental illness, that includes developmental disabilities, that includes anxiety disorders, that includes sexual dysfunction and low libido, that includes everything. And that's just kind of the bottom line, is that pathology and asexuality are different things and can co-occur in people or not. And I hope that that is something you can take away from this video. So that'll be all. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on this space in the internet. Bye!